When I first saw Queen Victoria's painting kit, as a filmmaker and watercolour painter myself, I was really surprised to find out that 150 years ago, she was an artist. Her great-great-great-grandson, His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales, also enjoys painting. And for the first time on film, he agreed to tell me the extraordinary story of the tradition of art in his family through the ages.
She was doing it in those days on her writing paper, I think, well, like I started.
And in the search for the earliest evidence of art in the royal family, we'd discover literally dozens of other talented artists.
Yes, you see, these are wonderful, these watercolours.
Revealing an extraordinary treasure trove of creativity by royal hands.
They're usually not quite spelt right there. Napoleon.
We'll be finding out more about their art and what their art means to them.
I think, you know, drawing from nature, observing nature is absolutely crucial. You know, I've obviously been inspired by just looking. There's usually the light is what catches my attention. You can look at the same view over and over again, then suddenly, one moment, there's the most magical light. You know, I sometimes paint in the evenings, and every now and then, when it dries, suddenly, it is exactly what I was looking for. You think, how did I do that? Which part of me has it come from? I was lucky enough to be brought up at Windsor Castle and Buckingham Palace and Balmoral. And of course, you imagine at Windsor, you're surrounded by the most marvellous things. Because when you were small, you rush about, you know, peddling or something up and down the corridors along, and you notice nothing, it's just a background. Suddenly, literally, I must have been 14 or something. Suddenly all the pictures on the walls, the furniture, just came into focus. Look, do you know what I mean? And they'd just been blurred sort of backgrounds, which were just there. Then suddenly I started looking.
Amongst this incredible collection of masterpieces by artists like Canaletto and Rembrandt, we found art actually done by members of the royal family themselves. And we were given a very special guided tour.
This oil painting was done by my father, the Duke of Edinburgh, when I was a child. It's of the Queen having breakfast in the private dining room here at Windsor Castle.
His father passed on this interest by showing the Prince of Wales how to paint when he was young.
My father's paintings, like many by my forebears, were done for pleasure on public and private trips.
This rarely seen lino cut of a circus horse was done by the Queen when she was young.
It's rather good, the horse. Yes, she must have been sort of 8 or 9, I suppose, or younger. But they're obviously done for their parents. Like many of these things were done, you know, given to the parents at Christmas time or birthdays or things, you know, like one does as a child. I remember doing it to my grandmother and others. You know, we walk away and shuffle off our mortal coil, but these things live on. That's what's so riveting, I think, about looking at other members of my family in the past. It's this feeling that, you know, there they were, you sense them sitting, doing the painting and everything else, and then that stays behind. It's still you. It's a part of you that's still there, you know, the rest of you's gone.
We'll be looking through the Prince of Wales's family tree to see if there's evidence of an artistic inheritance. We'll start with the earliest remaining art we can find today. In the fight for the throne of England, Mary, Queen of Scots, was imprisoned by Elizabeth I for nearly 20 years before being executed. With time on her hands, It was in prison that her art was to flourish.
I have the impression that Mary Queen of Scots' embroidery, which was an art, fascinatingly intricate and very thought out, you know, with these images. It's the first serious art in the royal family. The vine indicates that if you cut me down, further shoots will spring up, other branches, other leaves, because I have a son, I have a family which will go on and increase and multiply, and of course did go on and sits on the throne of England today, so she got that one right.
Another royal artist to perfect their craft in prison, this time during the English Civil War, was the great-grandson of Mary Queen of Scots, Prince Rupert of the Rhine. He lived at Windsor Castle nearly 400 years ago and was known for the special engraving method he pioneered, called mezzotint. His inventive artistry survives here to this day and is much admired by the Prince of Wales.
He was obviously incredibly skilled, I think. And you wonder whether he didn't do this as a result of what happened to his uncle, King Charles I. It's wonderful that these exist here and show, you know, what talent he had. You can imagine the scale of it. It was quite a job doing a mezzotint like that.
Coming from a long line of artists has inspired the Prince of Wales himself to draw and paint as a hobby, whenever he too has time to spare, although he's never had formal lessons. We were fortunate to be invited to accompany him to one of his most favourite haunts, a remote spot on the Balmoral estate in Scotland.
I think it was my grandmother probably who inspired me to, or encouraged me to look and observe. I think I must have been quite a willing part of that suggestion that I observe things. I wanted to do more than just take photographs. To me, it didn't give me the same sense of satisfaction somehow as actually trying to do it, you know, with eye to hand, to paper. I used to sit myself out on the hill and I'd try and sit and mix things, and it would rain and everything went spotty. And I thought, oh God. So I then eventually decided, years later, that I'd do it all inside. So I then do a sketch and put a note saying what the colours were and where the sun was and all that stuff, which is actually incredibly good training because it makes you look much more carefully, I think, and try to train yourself to retain the thing in your mind. I love painting snowscapes. There's something awfully satisfying about trying to bring, you know, make the white paper become snow. So you're doing everything in reverse. You know, you're putting in the darker bits to try and create that same sort of feeling. And that one, I did a sketch for that. There we are, that sketch. Trying to make sense of that's always interesting when you come back. Up at Loch Callerton, so on that side. What I love about doing the snow scenes, I mean, I always find the sky can be quite hard, but sometimes you get there. But it is rather wonderful at this time of the year, I think, or January. All those, and the light on the snow and the shadows is so exciting to do, I think.
Over the years, a talent for art has surfaced again and again in the royal family. But is this genetic? Or do they traditionally choose to spend their time developing their artistic skills? The Prince of Wales is especially interested in the next artist he's going to show us. arguably the most cultured monarch ever to sit on the throne of Great Britain.
4 generations on from Prince Rupert of the Rhine, everybody is taught that King George III was the Mad King. But in the library at Windsor Castle are some of the most remarkable and beautiful treasures, which I hope will redress this simplistic view of him. King George III had instruction in drawing, and particularly in looking at architectural drawing, as that was considered an important part of his education. I suppose all these things he did were exercises in observation, perspective. It clearly developed his eye for buildings and the whole issue of scale and proportion and everything else. So clearly it was an interest that remained with him for the rest of his life. His interest in art and architecture led him to give his active support and a very generous benefaction to the Royal Academy of Arts.
He was very much of his time in that in the mid-18th century, many more people of his ilk learnt to draw, were encouraged to draw, were expected to draw as a recreation. I do think it's plausible that somebody who's very busy and exercised with issues of constitutional governance, anxious about the French Revolution, might have decided that drawing a classical temple was a way of taking his mind off the rest of his life.
He used this illustration of a temple at Palmyra, now in Syria. God knows what will happen. I pray that they won't destroy this. But he did this wonderful thing of transposing that into a wonderful sylvan landscape, with the water and the boat on it.
It's very interesting the way he's tamed the landscape, and also I was very interested about the trees, the way he'd done them, and the work on the trees is remarkable.
But they all, at that time, in the 18th century, there was a particular way of doing the trees. But it took an awful lot of effort because you had to use the pencil, little sort of circles, do you see? And then smudge, presumably. But very effective. The end of 1788 saw the onset of the first serious bout of the king's illness, now recognized as porphyria, which was extremely severe. He's one of those people, I always felt anyway, been much maligned by history. Now, I discovered the other day that he was using products for his hair and things like that, which may have had arsenic in, because they've taken hairs from him. He says, and sent them to a laboratory and discovered that he had extraordinary levels of arsenic. So it could be that the use of arsenic in some of these, medications or something had, made it even worse, his delusions and his awful delirium and everything else that this poor man had to go through. So, obviously the disease, the problem, caused the most appalling pain and everything else, of course, drives you mad. There are very few drawings by him after this date.
The effect of the king's illness on the Queen and their much-loved 15 children was cataclysmic. The normal process of marriage for the daughters was halted, effectively leaving them in limbo with unlimited leisure time. They spent their hours botanising, studying flowers and plants at the family's artistic retreat, Frogmore House, not far from Windsor.
Princess Elizabeth was, I think, the most artistic, the most fun of the daughters, who had a real spark for life. She learnt how to do oils and watercolours.
That's really good, though, you know, the drops of water on leaves and things. And a bird's nest, you see. Brilliant. The moss.
When Elizabeth was finally married, she moved to Germany and her art took another turn. She filled her time cutting out silhouettes, which she sent back to her sisters.
These are, I mean, they're beautifully cut out by Elizabeth using her scissors, and they could be used in all sorts of different decorative ways. So here, in these pilaster strips, you have brown cutouts against black. Here you have a black cutout, which could be laid against white.
I was just about to drop a child into a bucket. Give it a wash or something. Rather fun, isn't it?
This room is called the Charlotte Closet, and hanging in the room now are a wonderful series of drawings in the style of etchings done by Charlotte, the Princess Royal.
The girls weren't the only creative members of the family. Their little brothers were taught art as well.
These ones are all by the Duke of Sussex and the Duke of Cumberland when they were small. You can imagine these were done at the age of 9 or 7 or something. Obviously, it was a combined approach with the teacher, because, I mean, to achieve this sort of level of competence at that age would be very difficult, I think.
But it's very good use of gouache, isn't it?
Isn't it?
You get a lovely picture of them all being taught art
Yes,
and the
exactly
tradition
that.
of handing down.
Well, exactly that, yeah.
In our search through the dozens of artists in the royal family tree, we came across an era bursting with creativity.
Another very creative member of my family was my great-great-great-grandmother, Queen Victoria. She and her husband, Prince Albert, spent much of their private time at Osborne House on the Isle of Wight, drawing and painting out of the public gaze. And many of the oil paintings by Queen Victoria and members of her family still hang at Osborne House.
They both are terribly aware of the importance of art, but for Victoria, I think it's more an emotional thing, an outlet for her emotion, and for Albert, it's much more of a sort of a duty thing.
Like many of my forebears, Queen Victoria and Prince Albert had both been encouraged to draw as children, and they were very well taught. This intriguing sketchbook was done by my great-great-great-grandfather, Prince Albert, aged 12. It probably came over in his luggage from Germany.
It's rather interesting. You see that he has a great eye in those sketches for soldiers. He's always looking at perhaps what princes are trained to look at, which is, you know, what medals you've got on, what uniform you're wearing, and what ribbons and stripes.
Yes, they're riveting.
They're full of energy, aren't
I
they?
mean, for them endless sort of disasters and military subjects. Marvellous idea, is galloping that way and shooting somebody coming from behind. Gracious, look at this. But these horses are quite good, aren't they?
Albert was a rather poetic, unusual character. And above all, he was interesting because he was a modernizer. And one of his passions was the idea of the reformed family. And I think he brought one of the most significant pedagogical ideas of the 19th century with him from Germany, and that is the idea of the kindergarten. Queen Victoria was very, very fortunate and quite actually in some ways unusual in having 9 children within 17 years without losing any.
She spent hours sketching them. This album, treasured by the royal family, gives us a unique insight into her as both artist and mother.
Because you didn't have cameras, it was crucial to do this, otherwise you had no records at all. The amazing thing is the time that they had. She was doing it in those days on her writing paper, I think, rather like I started.
I think those early sketchbooks are extremely interesting, the pictures of the children. She had a great powers of observation. She was fascinated by people. She's drawing tender pictures of her own children. She's scribbling portraits of the Prime Minister on her blotter, whatever it might be. But she obviously felt a sort of tenderness for her children.
I think these are so incredibly nice. That must have been it. Looks like Windsor to me. Adorable. Back views. Dressing up again. Yes, he was. It's Alfred. I mean, it's such a wonderful record, this, I think. That's the Kaiser. Marvelous background.
Both Victoria and Albert insist that their children should have drawing and painting and handwriting too, sort of factored into their timetables, which are set up from a very early age, from the age of 4.
That was part of the accepted approach to bringing up children, making sure they had, an adequate understanding of the arts.
You're going to begin by using a wash, using a brush, and then later on you'll have a chance to use a line.
So it might mean you've got layers of wash and figures or layers of drawing, and that will just give it a sense of movement because it is a quick posing class.
Prince of Wales set up his drawing school in London with the idea of passing on the tradition of drawing, just like the Victorians and the Georgians had before him. Today, the school runs classes for all ages.
I think what His Royal Highness is absolutely passionate about is helping students see that art is something that is the most wonderful resource to feed off and to inspire them and to help them exercise their imaginative muscles.
If you don't have that training, I suppose, you don't have the business of encouraging somebody to use their eye, then you miss an awful lot of the world around us. Queen Victoria's eldest son, my great-great-grandfather, later King Edward VII, was known as Bertie. His teacher did this thing of getting him to copy his, and in a funny way, I suppose, you did learn a lot by having to copy. So that's what happened, I think, in this case here with Edward Corbell doing one, and then my great-great-grandfather doing the other. That didn't quite work. Obviously a bad day, I think. It's quite difficult to be able to do. Otherwise, he gets quite good. No, you see, not quite spelt right there. Napoleon.
Queen Victoria spent a lot of time in Scotland, at her other retreat, Balmoral, where nature and the elements were to further inspire her art.
At every turn, you have a picture. These Scotch streams, full of stones and clear as glass, they're most beautiful. The peeps between the trees, the depth of a shadow, the mossy stones mixed with slate. This mixture of wilderness and art is perfection.
I mean, some of them are really remarkable, I think, her little watercolours. And looking out of her window at Balmoral, that view I know so well, it's so intriguing. And what I find so fascinating is how I have ended up doing the same sort of views. I've known it all my life, you know. I've been here since before I could remember, really. You know, inevitably, it's home. And I have tramped across the hills endlessly for the last 60 years. You know, they become indelibly part of your life and your soul, really. It's the light on the landscape, on the mountains and the shadows. That's the thing that really catches the attention. And it doesn't happen very often, funnily enough. You just suddenly get the right combination. And suddenly it's the dark and the light and the shapes which are really what I think are so important. So obviously, if I see something, I suddenly have to stop and try to remember it, you know, as much as I can. Because it's a very good, I think it's a very good exercise in observation. You have to try and imprint.
And what about colour? What he's seeing in the colours?
You know, I come to conclusion everybody sees it slightly differently. Depends the way you look at the world. But yes, I mean, it's then, of course, the fun is thinking while you're looking at it, now what paint colours am I going to use to try to create that feeling? I mean, finally, one of the most, I think, sometimes difficult colours to get is the colour of the birch trees in the winter, in that sort of January period, when they go purple. It's the most extraordinary thing, the bare branches. In the autumn, in October, a lot of the grass goes this orange colour. It's quite extraordinary with the frost. And it is an amazing colour. That gets quite exciting too, to try and make the yellows and the oranges and the reds look believable. You know?
In 1861, Queen Victoria's husband Albert died. We discovered this had a dramatic effect on her art. She retreated into widowhood for 40 years, and her paint box became her solace in his absence. Literally thousands of her paintings remain as testament to this period of mourning.
The tragic thing about all this, I think, is that these ones are all done after Prince Albert's death, and we'd always have things like the third year of my desolation in 1864. Each one says that. First, second, third, fourth.
Portraits of the children all but vanished, and instead she painted empty landscapes. In the spirit of a real artist, Queen Victoria expressed her emotions through her art.
Here's there we are, another one. October the 1st. Looking out of her window, up the Dee Valley. Wonderful stuff. What she used there, lots of burnt umber, do you think, and things like that.
Prince Albert's death was to affect the art of Queen Victoria's sixth child, Princess Louise, as it had done her mother's.
I suppose she was only 12 or 13 or something, and so they were all encouraged to do something like this, a drawing or a painting. So that's her, with presumably dreaming of her parents reunited in heaven. But she was quite young, you see. I mean, these are remarkable, I think. I mean, Princess Louise was, a seriously good artist.
She had learnt to draw and sketch, as any young Victorian lady would do, but Princess Louise found it very difficult trying to escape from this stifling attitude of her mother's that nothing should be done to interfere with Victoria's own mourning. Louise found an escape and found her own identity through following sculpture.
There was less opposition to the idea of a woman becoming a sculptor than there was to a woman doing other kinds of art. And that's possibly because sculpture is connected to monuments and to memorials. And so this was an extension, if you like, of the family respect that, the descendant, the daughter, was showing to her line, because Louise made a number of sculptures of her family.
In 1893, she produced what probably is now her most well-known work, which is a statue of her mother seated as she was at the time of her coronation, which is today to be found in Kensington Gardens. She believed very strongly also in supporting women's work, their opportunities and opportunities to become professionals. She was a modern princess.
What you get a picture of here is how the Victorian society, as reflected by the ideals of the royal family, the ambitions of the royal family, actually made amateurishness quite professional. I mean, they didn't earn money from it, and of course, heaven forbid that an aristocrat should think of selling a picture, but they did actually pursue it to a point in which they, wanted to be sort of as good, if you like, as a professional.
These ones here are by Queen Alexandra, who was my great-great-grandmother and married my great-great-grandfather, King Edward VII, when he was Prince of Wales. And clearly, while she was in Denmark as a child, she had some very good instruction. Incredibly competent. Look at that. Just to get the rocks. Really lovely. And you think she did it with this tiny little, do you see? That's all it was, a little tiny paint box, a tiny brush. But she clearly had natural talent anyway, but they're fantastic. I mean, there's this wonderful one of her mother-in-law, Queen Victoria. It's a marvellous figure, isn't it? Must have been at Balmoral somewhere.
It gives you a wonderful snapshot of life at Balmoral, doesn't it?
This is a marvellous view of the River Dee near Abergele, which I know so well, gained by Queen Alexandra. Extraordinary. So that must be Loch Mick, where we were.
Exactly.
That's it.
The Prince of Wales's artistic roots are not just on the maternal side. He was really keen to trace back his father's family line, and in our journey we discovered an astonishing revelation: a naval commander who could easily have been a professional artist.
My father's grandfather, my great-grandfather, Prince Louis of Battenberg, was remarkable in what he could do.
I hadn't really fully appreciated what a great artist my grandfather was.
He actually had his work, his sketches, they're more than sketches, done while he was accompanying my great-grandfather, King Edward VII, on his tour of India in 1875, I think it was. And the things he did of that tour were accepted by the Illustrated London News, and you had to be unbelievably good and competent to get into that. So he was again extraordinary.
My grandfather probably inherited quite a bit of it too, because I gather his father also, Prince Alexander, had been an artist as well. And of course one has to remember in those days, either you drew everything, or there was nothing to show people what the experiences were that you'd been through. All these wonderful drawings that he did on that tour, which he took over from the artist who became ill.
His Royal Highness often received jewels and pearls for his wife, of fabulous value, and on which some Maharajas spent a whole year's income. Live animals were often included. On one occasion, a full-grown tiger was led in by 4 powerful men, 2 holding the collar around the animal's neck and the others around the loins. The beast nearly trod on my toes. Gave me rather a start. On the way home, I made a number of sketches of the different animals and incidents in connection with them. Most comical. I sent them to the Illustrated London News, and in due course they nearly filled a copy of the paper. I made quite a lot of money, and I was elected honorary member of the Institute of Painters in Watercolour.
Ah, that was it. The ostrich. But she's brilliantly done. He must have had hysterics trying to get this ostrich up the steps. His feathers coming out.
They're having a terrible time. I do hope the poor bird didn't suffer. Poor creature. And I believe these were destined for the zoo. I wonder how long they survived in the zoo.
Sometimes you do tend to be given very extraordinary things. I was given a Russian bear by Khrushchev and Bulganin in 1955 when they came on a visit. That had to go straight to the zoo. And when was it? A few years ago, we were in Pakistan, right up in the north of Pakistan. I was given a most beautiful shampooed male yak, which was led up, looking fantastic. And of course, I sadly I couldn't take it back because I don't think it would fit in the crate or something. Anyway, I had to leave it behind. But it would have been rather fun to have brought a yak back, kept it at Highgrove. Absolutely extraordinary. This idea of being carried on a sort of, what is it, a palanquin or something?
Like his forebears, the artist Prince Louis and the Prince of Wales 150 years ago, the busy life of the heir to the throne involves a lot of travelling round the world in the glare of the public eye.
Although it is more than 15,500 kilometres from London, and I'm so jet-lagged that I feel a few sausages short of a Barbie, it is a great joy to be back here in Australia again, and we are incredibly touched by the warm welcome you've given us both.
For a keen artist like the Prince of Wales, these hot and exotic destinations provide much artistic inspiration. But increasingly his busy schedule doesn't include painting, so he invites an unpaid artist to accompany him.
I decided back in 1985, I think it was, I'd take an artist with me on every official visit overseas. So I've been doing this for quite a long time. It'll be amusing, I hope, for 1 or 2 people in years to come, possibly. The results of that. The fact that an artist is around, I find very enjoyable. I enjoy artists.
really was a surprise, a pleasant surprise, when I was asked to go along on this tour of Australia with him.
I think a painting is actually so much more fascinating in posterity terms than sometimes photographs. And so that's why I take them, and also because it keeps the tradition in the Royal Collection going.
Well done, Larry. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Yes. You don't want to have a paint, do you? No,
I'll leave it to that one. You found quite a good spot.
It's beautiful. In the shade, grand view. What more could you want?
And you've got the expert looking over your shoulder.
You've
got all that food to pick out too.
Oh, I'm dying for that.
There you go.
That's the mango. That's terrific.
Yeah, that's a start. Thank you.
Brilliant.
For the Prince to take an artist, he may not get as complete a record of the places he's been. He'll get more meaningful work from an artist, one would hope.
My problem, as you could imagine, on these overseas expeditions, on the official ones, is I haven't got time, so I do little sketches, and then I do them when I get back.
In Oman, we're put in the desert and just given an hour, let's say, to paint. So I painted him painting the desert. So much of the time he's on duty. And painting allows him a little time for quiet reflection and also a bit of an investigation of things at a deeper level than his whirlwind existence normally allows.
Painting like this is almost meditative in the sense that you enter another world. It's most extraordinary. Everything else is excluded. And you become so absorbed. I suppose meditation is concentration, really. And then coming out of it is like coming out from, like drawing a curtain and being dragged back into the real world.
I think it's very important to realize that people, however much they have to spend their life in the public eye, do have a bit of private time and the sort of things that interest them. I think Prince Charles has developed enormously, of course, as an artist, and it's always nice to discover that you've perhaps inherited something from earlier generations, which I've no doubt he has.
This is Hoona Mill near John O'Groats. It's the most wonderful place. You develop a system after a bit, and the same thing with the colours. I tend to have the same sort of colours. I've learnt, on the whole, a bit how you mix them and what produces what. The great thing, after a bit, is you begin to realise that something like this will look much better further away. So as you come away from it, I think at about 100 yards, it looked quite good.
It's a quality of soulfulness, I think, that you bring to it. And that's, I think, what the Prince has, as well as a sense of discipline. He has, in all aspects of his life, it seems, he's interested in things beyond the surface. He's interested in the enduring qualities of things.
That is Morocco. I think I did that. I nearly missed the aeroplane as a result because I wanted to finish it. And of course the problem with sitting outside in those hot countries is your water evaporates if you're not careful. Those two are the Selous game reserve in Tanzania, when there was a terrific amount of rain, everything had flooded. But again, I was quite pleased with these because it has this incredibly humid, hot feel to it, I think. That's the Serengeti. Well, the best time of day really is 6 o'clock on for 2 hours. Or either that, if you get up early enough in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, at this time of the year, it's fantastic. But I don't want to paint in the middle of the day. It's just hopeless.
Doesn't inspire you, does it?
Well, it's got no shadow, no contrast. It's in a funny way.
Well, cypress trees are very
Tuscany, I think.
inspiring, aren't they?
Yeah. And the fun was just, highlighting just the light on the edge of the cypress trees. Again in the evening. Because again, it was the shadows coming down from that wooded hill, which I thought was so special.
By looking at his art, we've been shown another side to the Prince of Wales. Inspired by his forebears, he enjoys spending his spare time painting for pleasure. But he's not the only member of the present generation of the royal family who produces art. Our journey has brought us to the Queen's niece, Sarah Armstrong Jones, a professional artist who's also been inspired by her family.
My mother was very creative and artistic, had an amazing brain, and my father is a photographer, so I think I was in a very creative family background. When she was little, she was surrounded by all these beautiful paintings and things, and I think she wanted to pass it on down to my brother and me.
Sarah now jostles for her position in today's busy contemporary art world.
I think it was very important to set up with a gallery and to have somebody to represent you. And I'm very lucky to have that in a position that I am now.
Hello.
Hello, Sarah.
Hi, how are you?
Hi,
Hi, Richard.
Hi.
Hi, Paul. Everything arrive okay?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, just getting there. We're just placing things.
We don't show them anonymously at art fairs, so her name's on there. People sometimes make the connection and they'll say, oh, is that Princess Margaret's daughter? And we say, yeah.
The gouache is probably in the corridor.
Good idea. Could you hang them in one long line?
Yeah, just as you come down.
We don't make any special concession for her background at all. So our main criteria is the strength of the work and how the exhibitions work.
Isn't it?
Yeah, it's good. She's more experimental than some of the other artists that we show. She's really pushing herself. So she's very much a professional artist and totally dedicated to that activity.
The drawings are based from nature, but it's just on a larger scale, because I'm interested to see the pencil line on a larger scale. And sometimes those fit into the oil paintings. One day, I liked what was happening. I think I was trying to experiment a bit, using my drawings much more in my watercolours, trying to combine the two. Quite liked what was going on. So I'm developing on those paintings now. I try and remember all the colours as much as I can, but I use my reference from the things that I've picked up in the landscape.
Set out on this journey, we didn't know what we would uncover. But looking behind the public face of the British monarchy, we found in the royal family a real commitment to art, generation after generation. Each inheriting an appreciation of what practicing art can bring, and also the importance of handing it down.
I think there's an artistic gene running through your family that you've inherited.
It must come down. You know, I hope we can pass it down to the next generation. We'll see what comes out of it.
My guess is that most families, have people who could do it if they really wanted to. But like all these things, you see, it demonstrates the importance of being introduced at a young age to appreciate things and to look and observe. With such a strong creative tradition, who knows who the next royal artist will be?